all right, I'm going to have to make some changes to this, but the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to grab that thing for the hours, that prompt that was from payroll iteration 3, and I'm going to paste it into payroll iteration 4. All right, so I can get rid of that stub that I have in there. I'm going to replace it with this. In fact, I'm just going to get rid of all the stubs for, well, I'll leave the stubs in there, that's fine. All right. Now, we talked about this before, but there's actually 3 types of things that we could put in here that are wrong. Right here. When we say enter hours worked, we could do 3 things incorrectly. First, we could put in non-numeric. So in other words, that would be letters, special characters, blanks, etc. Something I shouldn't put in. Second, we can put in a number less than 0 because we said that the minimum hours you could work were 0. Third, we could put in a number that's greater than 84. Those are our 3 error conditions that we have to account for. Does that make sense to everyone? All right. This one, for lack of better words, we'll call that an illegal operation. We're expecting a number, we're putting in something non-numeric. These 2 are what are referred to as range validation. Does that make sense to everyone? Anywhere from 50 to 85% of the code that you end up writing as a programmer is known as defensive code. Defensive code is like car insurance. It really and truly is. How many people in here have car insurance? Why? Because it's the law, right? But even more than that, there's even more fundamental reason. If you get into an accident, you're going to really need it, potentially, right? That's the same reason that you put defensive code in. Because if you need it, you might really need it. All right? So I'm going to erase this. So we asked the user right here. We asked the user, and I'm going to put in something that's incorrect. So please don't put in what I'm about to put in. All right? So we come in here, and I'm going to put a comment here that says, validate the entry. All right? And I'm going to say if is NaN hours worked. All right, again, this is not going to be correct. Everybody hear that? This is not going to be correct. All right, so if it's that, or hours worked is less than min hours. In fact, let's put this on separate lines so you can see everything that's going on here. Or hours worked is greater than max hours. As far as I know, we have now accounted for our 3 error conditions. So if any one of those things is true, all we're going to do is basically, for lack of better words, to keep it simple, I don't want that there. Oh, that's fine. Keep it there. Is we're going to ask them to do it again. All right. So if they put in a value that's out of range, we ask them to do it again. Okay? Look at that code. Don't key it in. I'm not going to remove it, but look at that code and tell me what's wrong with it. Nothing syntactically. That's not an error. There is a logic error with this code. What is the error? So I come in here and I leave it blank. Okay? I leave it blank. So it comes back in and asks me to do it again. Okay? I leave it blank again. When you do an if statement, when you're making a check, it's a one-time shot. I don't want it to be a one-time shot. We already know how to make that from happening. We want to do that. That actually is correct. So while we put in something that's non-numeric, or we put in a value less than 0, or we put in a value greater than 84, we ask them to do it again. So when they're all done, once we get down to this last curly brace that's right here, once we get down to this one, we have to have a number that's between 0 and 84. Does that make sense to people? Because we're keeping them in here as long as they put in something that's not between 0 and 84. Does all that make sense? And for those of you who are fast typists, I'll come right back to this, I promise. But those of you who are fast typists, I'm going to grab this, copy it to the clipboard, go down to my pay rate, paste that in, and the only thing I have to do is change it from hours worked to, what was it, hourly rate. Because it's basically the same routine from both of those. The only difference is, in this case, I'm checking the hours, and in the next one that I'll scroll down to in a minute, we're checking the rate. But the logic between those is the same. If that confuses you, look at it this way. All right, let's say that I'm asking you your height and I'm asking you your weight. And your height has to be between 12 inches and 96 inches, 8 feet tall. And your weight has to be between 1 pound and 700 pounds. So I say, Evan, what's your height? And he said, in inches. And he says, -6. Well, that's wrong. That's out of range. I said, no, that's not it. Tell me what your height is. And he goes, it's 100 inches. That's not within range either. So he says, no, it's 72 inches. I'm 6 feet tall. Fine. Then I say, what's your weight? And he does the same thing. We're checking the same type of thing. In other words, our logic is similar. Much of the code that you end up writing will have similar logic. The variables that you're testing will be different. The ranges of those variables will be different, but the logic between them will be similar. Yes?
Where did you put the second one at? Sorry.
Right below it.
Oh, at the paper.
Yeah. We're going to look at that in just a minute. I want to make sure everybody has this. This thing in here, this double pipe sign, the pipe is right up above your enter key. So it's shift and then hit the key right above your enter key. That's called a pipe sign. That means or. If this, or this, or this. When you do an and, you use the ampersand. We'll talk about and versus or when we get into the book, starting next week. Yes?
Are those actually doing something, or are they just like a reminder to us?
These?
Yeah. Are they actually
No, this is saying if this is true, or if this one is true, or if this one is true. It's only one of those can be true at a time. Because if I do put something in there, all right, that's not a number, that one's going to be hit. And then we'll skip these. We don't even have to. But if we put in a number, but we put in a negative number, then that one's true. If we put in a number that's greater than 84, then that one's true. All right? And if that still confuses you, look at it this way. All right, let's say that I say I'm going to have a party for all of you. All right? And there's two requirements for you to come to this party. and I say you have to be in the AWD program. That's the first requirement. And the second requirement is you have to be over 21 because we'll serve alcohol. All right? Then we wouldn't use this. We would use this. All right? Because we'd be saying you have to be in the AWD program and your age has to be greater than 21. So then they both have to be true. With an or, any one or any two or all three of these can be true when you use an or. Okay? So I decide, I'm going to have this party, and now I realize, well, there's only 8 of you, and I bought food for a lot more than 8 people. All right? So I change it to, well, if you're in the AWD program or your age is greater than 21, you can come. That means that anyone in the AWD program can come regardless of their age, and anyone who's greater than 21 can come regardless of what program they're in. Does that make sense? Because we're going to go through that again. In the book, they will talk quite a bit about and versus or. All right, does everybody have this? All right. So like I said, then we switch down to the other one, the next one, and it's the same thing, except change hours worked to hourly rate and change min hours to min rate and max hours to max rate. However, if it's easiest for you to just copy that stuff down and make the changes, then do that. So if you look up on the screen here, I'll go right back to this. But right now then, we've written this. We've written this. We've written this with validation. And we've written this with validation. Again, if you look up on the screen, does this make sense to everybody? When you hit this line right here, that line in purple, you have to have put in a rate that's between 0 and 100. You have to. Because if you put in something that's out of range, you're stuck in here until you do put in something within range. So you don't go down to the bottom until you put in a value within range. So in other words, that particular variable has been fully validated. All right, just like we, in the previous function, we fully validated, in the previous function, we fully validated the hours worked. Now we fully validated the hourly rate. And I know some of you may still be typing, but if otherwise, if you go back to the other program here, guess what? We don't have to change a lick in our payroll, in our calculate gross pay. So you can handle all of the, the if and the else. You can take that, copy it from payroll iteration 3, and paste that right into the calculate in number 4. You don't have to do any validation. You've already validated all the fields that are in there. You've already validated hourly rate and hours worked, which are the ones you're using. Since you've already validated them, you don't need to validate them again. Does everybody have this one done? Anybody still typing? All right. So again, when we come down to the calculate gross pay, that's right here. Let me make it a little bit smaller. There it is. And all I did was just copy in what we had from the previous program. That's everything. So now our 4 inputs have been done. We inputted the first name, we inputted the last name, we inputted the hours worked with validation, we inputted the hourly rate with validation, and now we're inputting the calculate gross pay. Good news is we only have 2 routines left, and they're just copied. You can copy in that alert statement that does the individual's information, and you can copy in that alert statement that just does the final information, and put those into the 2 routines. Again, this should be a straight copy. If you've got the 3rd one open, just copy it in. Don't type. All right. And again, if you look up on the screen here, just so you see this, there's my alert with all my individual payroll information right there. I'm going to copy that to the clipboard. I'm going to come down here to my output individual payroll information, paste that in. Now that one's done. Then I'm going to come down to where I've got the add my total employees, etc. Oh, I've got to account for this too, don't I? Everybody see this? I still have to do this, and I forgot to. So please look up on the screen. These 2 lines right here. I've got to put those 2 lines into my calculate gross pay. So that's the whole routine. I think that's still big enough, hopefully, that Matthew and Christopher, you can see that okay. Does everybody have this one? Yeah? All right. Then there's the other. In fact, I might be able to fit them both in here. Let's see. Where's that final information? Oh, come on. Where did we put that stuff? Okay. All right. Comment in here that says display individual totals, and I'm just going to grab this and copy it. here I'm going to say display accumulator. Accumulator totals. So. I gotta go up for just a minute. I'll come right back down here. I want to get the right names. Total employees and total gross pay. I think I've got all the right names in there. So that should be. Should be everything. Put that in, save it, run it, and make sure that it works, okay? We're only going to do one more of these. I was going to originally talk to you about arrays. I'm not going to do that yet. This is enough stuff to be throwing at you, all right? Hopefully you've gotten a chance to put everything in. Hopefully you've gotten a chance to test it and ideally make sure it works. All right, if it doesn't work, you know, again, we're getting to the point now with almost 300 lines of code or 250, it could be a lot of different things. All right, but one thing I want you to understand, and this is what I've been trying to explain to you, doing it this way, you should write some code and test it. Write a little bit more code and test it. You shouldn't write 250 lines and then test it for the first time. Unfortunately, that's the way many people code. All right. Not only that, if you write 30 lines and test it, then you write 30 more lines, you should test those, but go back and make sure that the 30 original lines still work with the new lines you put in. All right. Some books will call that kind of stuff like regression testing. All right. All right. Just, I wrote some stuff on the board here because I want you to think about it this way. Let's imagine that it's the first day of class. Okay, I've just explained to you what the class is all about. And I said, we're going to talk about what is a website, and after we could talk about what is a website, we're going to go in and we are going to talk about website development. Then we're going to talk about website design. Then we're going to talk about HTML5. Then we're going to talk about CSS. Then we're going to talk about JavaScript. Then we're going to talk about jQuery and Bootstrap. Okay? When you count those, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and there's 8 of you in here, right? All right, so it's the first day of class, and we have, for whatever reason, they decide that they're going to bring in a high school tour on that day. So I've just explained to each one of you what each one of those things are. I've given you literally a 5-minute explanation. Now these high school people come in here. All right? And I go, Matthew, why don't you tell people what Bootstrap is? And he looks at me like, I just learned it myself and you give me 5 frickin' minutes. You do it. Well, I'm kind of Maine. The way that I was at the beginning is the way kind of you were when you walked in here. In other words, I had to explain everything to you. But now imagine it's the last day of the semester and those high school students come in. And I say, we're going to talk about these 8 things. And I go, Christopher, explain to them what a website is. You get done. I go, Andrew, explain to them what website development is. You get done. I say, Evan, explain what website design. You get the idea. Now I'm delegating the authority to you. That's what we're doing with functions. Your function is to explain what a website is. Your function is to explain website development. Your function is to explain website design, etc. That's the way most businesses operate when you think about it. If I decide that I'm going to sell the infamous widget, or maybe I'm going to make those spinner things, all right, I'm going to make them in my garage, okay? And let's say this was before that they became popular. I'm the first one to make them. And I make 1,000 of them, and I'm thinking, oh, maybe they'll sell. Not only do they sell, I quickly get orders for 100,000 of them. All right? Well, I'm not going to be able to make them in my garage anymore. So I get a warehouse, and I start making them in there. Now the problem is, I've got all these orders, and they get done, and I got to drive them all over the place. And then, while I'm driving them all over the place, I realize when I get back, my toilet's clogged. All right? The bottom line is this. I have to hire more people, correct? A delegation of authority. That's what Maine is. Maine is a delegation of authority. But it's kind of the supervisor. It's the driver. Maine is typically known as a driver. All right? Now, what you can do, if you would please, is take everything that you've got. We're going to move it around, but I want you to take everything that we just typed in, everything, and copy it to the clipboard, and then bring up the next payroll iteration, which is iteration 5, and just overwrite all that stuff that's in there right now. So highlight main and input, all that stuff. Just paste in what you just did. All right, we're going to move stuff around and change a few things around, but I think it's going to be faster to do it this way. So copy everything from iteration 4 into iteration 5. Did you hear that? Again, we're going to move stuff around in just a minute. It's 9:41. I'll go till right around 10. All right, and then, so that's about 19 minutes, and we'll take another break. All right, if we don't finish it now, we'll finish it up after that. We will be done probably no later than 10:45. So again, you will have an hour to work today on homework, on the website, on whatever, and all period tomorrow. Everybody hear that? No lecture tomorrow, lab the entire period. If you are behind, please try to catch up, and that wedding website stuff is due on Monday. All right, I do plan on going over to my daughter's early next week and having copies of everything that you guys have done. All right. And if she says, "Oh, this one's cool," all right, hopefully she says that 8 times. And I say, "Fine." Then you got to pick out the one you want. Well, that's hard. I don't know how to do it anyway. Well, I want your help. No, get your fiance's help. I don't want to have a lick to do with who you pick. I don't want it ever to be said, "Oh, well, Jeff picked Tony's because of course he likes Tony best." I don't want that. So she's picking. I don't care if she does it or if she does it with him. I don't care I don't care if she lets her fiance's dog do it, Remington. I really don't. But she's going to pick. All right. Then what I'd like to do is I'd like to go through the whole process with you. And I plan on doing this maybe next week before we even start. I'm going to show you how I would go in and literally get a domain name and how I would sign up for the account and do all that stuff. We could put it on Inside Rankin. We can do that. I can show you how to do that too. But I'm going to go out to GoDaddy or something, and I'm just going to set up that account for her, and she's going to have it for I'll pay for it for a year. All right. Well, I wanted to do that around the beginning of November, because she's getting married right now, the 5th. That's like 50. There's 52 weeks in a year. She's getting married in 51 weeks from tomorrow. All right, did everybody do this? Did everybody come up to? Yes.
Is there a prompt in the calculate gross pay? 'Cause
No, there is not a prompt in the calculate gross pay.
whenever everything works until, basically put in the hours worked and then it just disappears.
Because your hourly rate then is a different name than how it's declared. It says input pay rate and it should be input hourly rate.
Ah, you see that? It says here input hourly rate, and here I called it input pay rate. That should say hourly rate right there. My error. Thank you for finding that, Colin. You were just introduced to debugging. Not on purpose, but you were anyway. You're going to have to change it in that one and in iteration 5. If you'd all just stop for a second and look up on the screen, if I give you some specs, I give you some specifications, and I say write a program that does this, whatever this happens to be, all right? And you go, you know what? I don't even have a flippin' clue as to where to start. I have no idea. I have no idea what to do. Then you start by doing this. You take the specs and you put them into a comment, all right? Then you come down and you say, I'm going to try to write an IPO chart, an input processing. Oh, this may change, but I'm going to try to write that. Then I'm going to come in here and I'm going to try to write some pseudocode. And if I'm totally confused or I'm not sure if it's correct or whatever, then I raise my hand and I ask for help from the instructor. Does that make sense? But when you do this and you go, because I've had this happen before with students, they come up and they go, Mr. Scott. I walk over there and they go, I don't know where to start. And I say, you got that right. And I walk away and I sit back down. I've done that to people. What the hell are you doing? What did I tell you? At a minimum, you put a comment in with the specs. At a minimum, you try to do an IPO chart. At a minimum, you try to write some pseudocode. If you've shown me you've got the wherewithal to do that, I'll work with you. But if you throw your hands up and say, I don't even know where to start, I'm just going to agree with you. And I don't think that's asking too much of any of you. All right? And I will tell you, well, can I Google? You probably could Google it. But the problem is if I give you an assignment, you Google it, you find out somebody's already done it, and you copy it in and you get it to work, what have you accomplished? You've shown you can copy and paste. Wow. But let's face it, almost anything I could give you as an assignment, somebody has done it already. All right, and I've had this happen too. I had a student in a Java class, they were way behind, and all of a sudden they started turning in their programs. They were better than anybody else's in the class. All right. So what I did was I went and Googled one of their comment lines. Not only did they take it right off of the internet, but they took the comments that even had spelling errors and everything else in it. It took everything. So the next day, the student asked, and it was a guy, and he said, "Did you grade the homework?" And I said, "Well, I've looked at them, but I got a couple questions for you." And I printed out his, and I printed out the one from the was on the internet, and I literally put them where they were like this, and I did this, and you could see that other than his name on there, they were 100% identical. And I asked him, "How did that happen?" And honest to God truth, he goes, "Well, they must have copied what I did." I said, "Okay." I was kind of ready for that too. So I said, "All right, how do you spell this?" And it was one of the words that was in there. And he spelled it correctly. And I said, "Then why'd you spell it incorrectly here? And why'd you have this one incorrect?" And I said, "It looks to me, since I looked and I could see a date on that one, and it was from 2 years ago, I don't think they went ahead in time 2 years into the future." And I said this. And I didn't do it in front of the class because I didn't want to embarrass the person in front of the class. And they said, "Well, I didn't cheat." I said, "Fine, I'll believe you in one condition." They said, "What's that?" I said, "I want you to sit down and I want you to rewrite that program." "Okay, and you can't use the internet and you can't use this program. I want you to write it from scratch. I'll even give you the comments." "Well, I don't know if I can do that." "No, you should be able to. It's your code, right?" "Okay." And I let them sit there. They literally sat there for about 45 minutes and wrote about 2 lines of code. They dropped the next week. All right. I wasn't trying to be a hard ass or a mean SOB or whatever, but if you don't do your own work and you get hired into a job, they're not going to keep you very long. Cheating might get you a job. It sure as hell isn't going to keep the job. All right. So now, has everybody been able to copy that in to Part 5? Again, you have to go down and, as Colin mentioned, you'll have to change this input pay rate to input hourly rate on number 5 too. All right. So again, putting this in perspective, we did 00, which was hard-coded. All right, we got that done. We did 01, which had the prompt statement in there, and not much else other than hard-coded. We did 02, and that had the if and the else. We got that done. We did 03, where we came in and we did a while loop. We just finished 04, where we did functions with no parameters. Now we're going to do 05, which is functions with parameters. All right? Right now we have no parameters in our program. None. We're going to start adding them right now. What's a parameter? It's kind of what I mentioned to you before when I said to you, clean the room. And you were supposed to come back and say what room. Parameters provide additional information. All right? If I say, Matthew, add 2 numbers for me. He's going to sit there. Eventually he'll probably say, well, you want to give me the 2 numbers? Those would be the parameters. All right? If I say, hey, Ryan, here's 6 numbers. Tell me the average of those 6 numbers. And I never give him the 6 numbers, it'll be darn hard for him to give me an average. All right? Those are what parameters are. Now, the other thing we're going to be able to do with parameters, I'm going back for a second to the one we just looked at. It's considered totally fine to make constants global. Did everybody hear that? That's considered Totally a fine practice. It is not a fine practice to make variables global. You should strive to make as few variables global as possible. Ideally, 0. If I've got a variable that I'm using, let's say that I write myself a program, and that program has 20 different functions in it. And out of those 20 functions, 17 of them use the same variable. Then maybe that variable should be global. Does that make sense? There is no variable that's in here that has to be global. None. So the first thing we're going to do in our version 5 is we're going to grab all of our variables, all of them. We're going to copy them to the clipboard. And believe it or not, we're going to put them right in the main, right before the while loop. And I'm going to change so it doesn't say anymore, I don't want this to say global variable declaration. I want it to say local variable declarations. If you define variables inside of a function, those variables are known as local variables. So I change that to local variable declaration right there. My constants are still global, so they're still outside of everything. But now my variables themselves are here. Does that make sense? All right. We haven't passed anything yet, but we just turned them from global to local. Let me tell you another reason that you don't have global variables. When you have global variables, you can have what are called side effects. All right? And what that means is, in this routine we just wrote, you may or may not agree with this, but since all of these variables in here were global, all of them, I could have come down into the bottom here where I calculated and printed out my gross pay. Could I, true or false, could I have come in here and said, hey, gross pay equals 1. I'm now made $1 million. Couldn't I have done that? I can do that with any variable. Any variable. All right? Now, sometimes you want to have side effects. Sometimes you want to do things like that. So in just a couple minutes, we're going to pass in here first name. And then we're going to say first name equals that. Okay? That'll be fine. Yes?
When you first pasted before the while, did you get rid of the ones that were global?
No, I took the ones that were global, that were up here. I kept the constants, but I took all the variables that were global and pasted them into here, and then changed the word global to the word local.
Okay.
All right? Now, the good news is, you don't have to write any more code other than just adding a few variable names in. You've already got 95% of this code is done. Everybody hear that? A good 95% of what we have to do is done. So let me show you how to do it. So we want to come in here and we want to input first name. Everybody agree with that? We want to input first name. Well, now we're going to say first name equals input. I'm going to show you 2 ways to do this. Everybody hear me? Don't start typing yet. I want to show you 2 ways to do this. All right? So I can do this. I can say first name equals input first name. All right? And then I can come down here where I've got my first name, and instead of saying this, I can type in return. And that will return that value that I put in there. All right? Now, I don't like doing it like that, so I'm going to do this. I'm going to say first name equals this, and it's going to look almost kind of weird. There's the first name, and I'm going to pass that in as a parameter. All right? So I've got my local variables, and now inside of here, I'm going to say first name equals input first name, and I'm passing into it first name. So I'm passing in the same parameter that I'm setting my result to. And you might say, oh, that just looks weird. All right. Well, now I can come into here, and I can come back again where we had this. First name equals prompt, and I can say return first name. But that's not enough. I have to put first name in here too. So now I'm saying first name, first name, first name. All right? So let me go back. Did everybody get this? Did everybody put that line in? All right, put that line in. Did everybody make your variables local? Yes? Okay. Then put in that line at the beginning. First name equal input first name with first name. All right. This right here, this, just so you know, there's actually a name for this, not first name. But when you pass something like this is what it's actually called right here, correct? It's called first name. I'm passing it in as first name. That's called an actual parameter. That's its actual name. Who cares? Well, when I come down to here, I don't have to call it that. I can just call it FN as an example, or anything. I could call it Ralph if I wanted to. It doesn't matter. Those are called formal parameters. So the name of my formal parameter does not have to be the same name as my actual parameter. It can be. It does not have to be. Everybody hear that? It can be, but it does not have to be. And you might say, okay, I even get that, but why would you ever want to make it different? All right? And I want to show you, and I'm going to break away from this, but I'll come right back to it. I want to show you why you might want it to be different. All right? So imagine for a second, I've got a main here. So I've got a function main. This is, I'm not going to write true JavaScript, but it's basically it is. So I'm going to write here var num1 equals 53, var num2 equals 44, var sum equals add 2, and I'm going to pass there num1, and I'm going to pass there num2. And let's say that right there, that's my whole main. Now I come down here and I write function add 2, and I call this num1, and I call that one num2. I give them their same names. Now all I have to really say, if I want to, is I can just say return num1 plus num2. Sum is now going to hold 97. Does that make sense to people? So in other words, when I call this right here, what it's really doing is it's putting 53 here and 44 here, and 53 here and 44 here, and 53 here and 44 there. Does that make sense? So it makes a lot of sense to call them the same thing. But I decide later that I want to be able to also do this. And I want to have num3 and num4, and I'm going to call this sum2. And I'm going to pass in num3, and I'm going to pass in num4. It'll still work. It still works. Okay? And let's give these different numbers. So let's call this 333 and 78. It will still work just fine the way it is. But now it's a little confusing. Why'd you call it num1 and num2 up there and num3 and num4 there? So quite often, if you're going to call the same function more than once, you'll take the parameter names and you'll make them different. See what I mean? But you don't have to. All right? So we go back to this. All right? Now, see if you can write the next one. So go back up to here. This is going to become last name equals input last name, and you're going to pass last name. All right? So you're going to do that. All right. And then you're basically going to take what you did for the first name. What do I have? Thought I changed it. Where did I put that? I don't know. Did I change the other one? No, I just didn't save it. All right. So we came in here and we said, this is weird. Oh, there it is. Okay. FN then. So right there, input first name. Then this will become your input last name. So this will say enter last name with last name. And we can change this to L. We don't have to, but we can change this to L and this to L. All right? So then go back and see if you can do the other two. Go back and see if you can do the hours worked and the hourly rate. All right? After you get this done, it's almost 10:05, so let's take a break. Let's come back, please, at 10:15, and we'll finish this up.